Thank you all for being with us. I was actually hoping to have dinner with each of you alone, but it turned out that this would be the best way, and this has been 5 years. This is my 6th opportunity to be before the Chamber. It has been 5 years since we began collectively the journey of the Ivany Commission, the report. So really, we're the halfway show here. It's like halftime if you're at the Super Bowl. But we were hoping, and I was hoping, to actually engage in a conversation with you, to hear directly from you on the things that you think are going well and the challenges that you think this province faces and the opportunities, quite frankly, that are before us. Pat is going to moderate, but it is not going to be our show. It's going to be your show. And I encourage you to ask all of the questions that are on your mind. You can't offend me. I've been doing this job too long. So I look forward to working with you. I'm going to tell you, I've never been more optimistic about the future of this province than I am today, and I've never been more looking forward to continuing doing this job than I am today. There's a spirit, not only in HRM, but around this province, that is contagious. You have to get a chance to get out. It's not just all of the great numbers that you're hearing about and immigration numbers. There's a vibrancy in communities, whether it is now Lunenburg, the stuff that is happening in Yarmouth, the 2020 Pictou County, the things outside of HRM, things in Cape Island, where community is taken over in many ways its own destiny, all driven in part by the Ivany Commission, but I also believe in part by the way all Nova Scotians have embraced the challenge that was provided to us in working and realizing that our collective future will not just be left in the hands of government. Government has an important role to play, but so do each of us as individual citizens. And the spirit that I feel in communities makes me more optimistic today than I was 5 years ago. And it's why you're looking at the national and international communities who find and want to know what is happening in Nova Scotia. When you look inside of the Federation of Canada, we are a bright light on many fronts. We need to continue this momentum, and in order to do that, all of us collectively, the Chamber, organizations across this province, and us individually, have to recommit for the next 5 years to ensure that what was recommended to us 5 years ago on our 10-year journey of the Ivany Commission will become our reality 5 years from now. And I know I'm committed to that task, and I hope you're ready to join that journey with me. Pat, thank you today.
Thank you. That's great, Premier. And I can't help but mention that our Business Voice magazine this month, the cover is Ivany, and kind of reporting on that halftime. I don't know that I guess you would be Adam Levine. I'm certainly not. So anyway, if we're the halftime show, you're Adam Levine, but it does have, some great...
I've been called a lot of things, though, I will tell you.
Okay. Anyway, some great information on kind of where we are on the Ivany journey. So really recommend that. And I'm really thrilled to hear you say that it's everyone's responsibility, because I do believe there's a bit of confusion about the Ivany report. I believe that there are people that think it's government's responsibility, but I was really pleased to hear you say that it's all of our responsibility, because I agree with you.
And I think we also should celebrate the fact that I believe the majority of Nova Scotians have recognized this as a collective journey together. They obviously want their government to act prudently, responsible, do the things that are important, invest in the things that matter to us as citizens. But they also want to make sure that we provide an economic environment and a business environment that will allow them to live where they want to live in this province and achieve the hopes and dreams for their own families, like Fatou demonstrated here today that her sister had for her.
Absolutely. Great. So we do have a long list of questions, and if you have additional questions, please just hold up your hand. I'm sure they'll come around and get them. So these are lots of questions. So let's get started. Are there any new developed youth programs that focus on attracting, retaining, and developing youth skills that you're aware of?
Yeah, we've continued. This is actually the 4th anniversary of Graduate Opportunities that we started. Over 700 young people have been attached to jobs. It's a combination of working with private sector, individual businesses across the province to ensure that university and community college graduates get their first job here in Nova Scotia. We've continued to enhance our co-op opportunities, which will rely on the business community to help make sure we shape those. We will become a funding partner. The good news of all of those are the fact that we have seen for the third consecutive year that our cohort between 20 and 35 in this province has grown each year for the last 3. That is the first time that we've had 2 consecutive years since 1990. That is, in my view, the demonstration of what can happen when the power of government collaborates with the private sector and provides an opportunity for these young, bright minds. Every metrics that you look at, if we provide our children or those sons and daughters who choose to come and live in Nova Scotia with their first job opportunity in this province, they will stay.
Great. Absolutely. New revenue source, cannabis profits. So cannabis is now legal in Nova Scotia. I did ask the Premier earlier if he's going to his previous cannabis supplier or if he's now shopping at the NSLC. But he told me that it was really none of my business. So.
No, what I said was going to my previous one who didn't exist.
Okay. So it is a new revenue source. The federal government provided a greater level of excise for cannabis. I guess the question is, where will some of that be spent, and will some of it specifically arrive in the municipalities or across the province?
Well, I'm looking at the Minister of Finance who is here. It's amazing how many people have told us how to spend that money before we received it. But we actually don't see this as a huge revenue source for us, especially in the coming years. It may be for future governments or ours if we're here long enough. The cost of delivering and administering the delivery of cannabis has really consumed, pardon the pun, all of the revenue that we've received. We will be demonstrating as a province those costs. Municipalities who require some will have to demonstrate those costs. I, for one, don't see the huge policing cost increases. I hope my brothers aren't here. That are here. We are now dealing with an illegal product, one that we have been dealing with an illegal product. Now we have an illegal product that we can actually deal with. We do know there will be investments in training, which we're committed to, investments in technology, ensures being able to detect impairment. That will be part of the province's responsibility. But we don't see the level of cash revenue that that people have been talking about. And in the meantime, any revenue that we do receive will be consumed in the implementation of this product.
And is there an opportunity for the private sector to participate in the sale of perhaps edibles when they come online in the future?
We're in the process of that. One of the things that we were told very early on, that it was important, and certainly in the beginning, that as a government that we actually hold tight to the distribution model that we were using. We've seen places around the globe that went with a more liberal approach, where they allowed the product to be sold in many corner stores. It's hard for those jurisdictions now to bring control of that product again. As you know, supply has been an issue in many Canadian provinces. We do know that there are a number of companies here in the province who have been giving a license by Health Canada to grow that product. When the edible market comes on, we will more than likely in the beginning be looking at our current model of distribution, and then we'll reassess that as that product goes into the marketplace.
Perfect. You've been to China a number of times. Yeah. The current issues with China, do you see whether this is going to have a significant impact on Nova Scotia, or do you still believe that China represents a significant opportunity in Nova Scotia?
Certainly, obviously, we're concerned about what's happening with our two countries. China is an important partner for us. I continue to see our export opportunities to continue to grow. We have a world-class product, and the world wants it. I'm proud of the work that the Minister of Fisheries and his department has been doing in terms of ensuring that we're maximizing the value of our product. When we came into government in the December, shortly after we were elected, you could buy lobster in most superstore parking lots off the back of a half-ton truck. I'm proud to say you're not able to do that now, and much of that is to do with the growth of what we've had in China. I am concerned on the other side, though, which I saw as the next phase of this relationship, was to continue to build on our international students. Almost 4,000 of our international students that come to this province every year come from China. I believe that number can grow. We're working very hard with the airport to make sure that we get a direct flight into the China market. We're continuing to work with that, and we'll continue to do that work as the issues get solved between our two countries. I believe we will get to a common outcome, but it's important that we, as a government and business communities, continue to recognize that China is an important part of our collective future in growing this province economically, and we will continue to do that.
That's great. The question, I'll read it as it's written. We have the most stable provincial government in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Premier. My question is, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for Nova Scotia, and how will you, or maybe us, capitalize on that?
I think the biggest opportunity for us will require us to be confident enough to recognize that we are not only a jewel in Canada, we are an envy of the world. When I travel, when I look at the opportunities outside, I go looking for, in terms of China, it is an export opportunity. It is for a chance for us to be able to welcome inbound investment. But let's not lose sight of Europe. We should be the entry point into Canada when we're coming from Europe. We have a world-class airport. We have all major air carriers coming in. We as a government have invested heavily in helping our partners to continue to more direct routes. When you look inside of Canada, the cost of doing business in Toronto and Vancouver, this is an attractive place to be. As long as I get the opportunity to do what I'm doing, I'm going to sell this province, this city, but it will require all of us. All of you that have networks in your, whether it's your businesses, the associations that you're involved in globally, continue to promote this province and recognize this is not only a great place to do business, but it's a great place for future employees to raise their families and live.
Great. So the next question, why doesn't the government make meaningful change in personal and corporate taxes to make us more competitive? And perhaps it's a two-part question, and why don't you do more to shrink government and focus on debt loads in the province?
Yeah, we've continued, as you know, we started out with a $500 million hole. We had many tough conversations with the public sector when it came to ensuring that we were able to sustain the financial future of our province. At the same time, we've heard from many of you, and many of you not in this room, about the fact that we need to continue to stabilize services that we have in this province, healthcare being one of them. Required major investments. We are in the front end of a $2 billion capital expend on healthcare infrastructure, which I think is a wonderful opportunity, I want to tell you. Not very many generations get the opportunity to shape healthcare delivery. We're getting that with the QE2 redevelopment and the redevelopment that is happening in Cape Breton. At the same time, we recognize we needed to make investments in public education. We're making investments, give our next generation the same opportunities that you and I had, and that would require some investment, making sure that the system responded to their needs. Very proud when we found our way to some fiscal health that we've introduced pre-primary, that every 4-year-old, regardless of the socioeconomic circumstances they are born into, will get an evidence-based, play-based program in the province of Nova Scotia. We're halfway through that. So one of the things that we've heard loud and clear from some of your members and others, there's a balance here. When you get yourself to fiscal health, make sure that the services that attract people, that people want to live in a community, to continue to breathe that quality of life that we have, make those investments, shore up those services, and at the same time, as we were doing that, we provided one of the largest tax cuts in the history of our province, but we dedicated and we committed it to low-income Nova Scotians by changing the basic personal exemption for those on a sliding scale. We believe that made sense. Those who needed our help the quickest were getting it. And at the same time, that money was turning around and ensuring that they could provide a quality of life for their own families.
Okay, great. Healthcare. When will every Nova Scotian have a family doctor?
I bet I saw Tim Houston earlier. I think he's asking that question. Listen, we're continuing to ensure that we work to provide access to primary health care across our province. One of the things that's important for all of you to recognize, inside of Canada, we have the 4th highest attachment of patients to physicians. There's only 3 Canadian provinces doing better than we are. We're going out and we're actually recruiting and attracting in a global marketplace that hears all of that challenges that is perceived to be in this province, and yet we're still able to recruit not only family practice physicians, but specialists. We recruited over 100 last year. We know that as we go through the model changing, a nurse practitioner will become an important part of primary care delivery, so will family practice nurses. We've increased the number of seats at Dow Medical School. We've broadened our residency program to attract young people. We need to continue the momentum of building. But let me tell you, I understand the anxiety that some of you have, and some of the people that I represent have, who do not have a family physician. And some of you have a physician that you know is getting ready to retire. I want you to understand that we know that, the health authority knows that, and it continues to be our #1 priority. Even when we make strategic investments in infrastructure, it's about attracting healthcare workers to come to Nova Scotia, specialists, family practice docs. It's why we're taking this opportunity when it comes to make these major capital investments, that we can demonstrate to the global community that we have a place where healthcare workers want to work, and we're ready to welcome them.
Great, thank you. If Northern Pulp were to close, impacting the forest industry throughout the province, how do you foresee maintaining a balanced budget and invest in roads and hospitals? Back to healthcare.
This will be, one of the biggest issues facing our province in a very long time. We as a government made a decision 5 years ago. We made it very clear to the industry and to Northern Pulp that we gave them a deadline, which is January 31st of next year. I'm committed to that deadline. We believed we've given them the timeline required. I've also said if people are looking for an extension, they need to unify a community. They need to get buy-in from Pictou Landing, who quite frankly has been dealing with this issue far longer than any of us. And if they want to have an extension, I'm more than prepared to have a debate on the floor of the legislature. We as a government have made our decision. If oppositions want to amend government bills, there's a way to do that. But I'm committed to cleaning up Boat Harbour, and I want to work with the mill and the industry to see a future. But everyone needs to fully understand that we are committed to dealing with the issue of Boat Harbour. I hope, it's my wish, that the mill can find a path forward to have a treatment facility. In the meantime, we as a government are looking at what are our options to deal with many of the chips, residuals that come from many of our sawmills across this province, to find new markets, new opportunities to deal with that if that mill closed permanently.
Perfect. Fracking. How quickly can we begin? It's a short question. Yeah.
I'll go back to my last answer. We've been very clear. You require community buy-in. We've said all along, it requires First Nations support, and it requires individual communities. We're doing currently and updating an onshore atlas, which has been driving much of the activity off our shore. We know now there are communities that we believe have a gas reserve. There are conversations going on in those communities, and we have made it clear both to the First Nations community and to respective counties across the province that if they do the work, we will entertain the opportunity for them to do hydraulic fracturing.
Okay. And I know you've been working on interprovincial trade, and you are a champion of freer interprovincial trade, so I want to commend you for that. I think this is a more local question, so Nova Scotia question, is there any willingness to address very restrictive alcohol regulations?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So we have, that's the vice I do use. We have begun to work to liberalize our alcohol distribution. There are many restrictions, particularly we've seen the tremendous growth in the craft brewing industry, many restrictions in our restaurants. How do we make sure that we provide an appropriate way to allow the entrepreneurial spirit of many of these men and women to be able to grow? at the same time letting their businesses flourish. You may have noticed that I joined Alberta and Saskatchewan in terms of opening up personal consumption imports. There are no limits in Nova Scotia. I did that because I had a great deal of confidence that all of you know what great products are produced in Nova Scotia. But at the same time, I wanted to send a signal that we as a province are prepared and feel confident enough that we can compete inside of Canada and outside of Canada on every level. And it was one of the ones that was grabbing much of the headline, and I wanted to dampen the conversation from our perspective around alcohol while we work on what's happening internally and get a national focus on some of the other limitations and restrictions that I believe are holding back private sector growth.
That's great. That's great. And I absolutely agree with you. I sit on a group called the Global Cities Council, which is the 8 largest chambers across the country. We are trying to generate some enthusiasm among other provincial premiers on the reduction of barriers to interprovincial trade. So I thought that was a great initiative, and I think you're right. I think that some of the products in Nova Scotia, whether it's wine, beer, or distilled spirits, can rank up against any of these products. And I only hope other provinces open up those barriers as well so we can ship it.
I think it's important to recognize that oftentimes we believe that it's Central Canada or Western Canada will set the tone. We can set the tone in Atlantic Canada for red tape reduction. We are setting the tone. Our sister provinces of Atlantic Canada have collaborated. The occupational health and safety standards that are adopted nationally started here. Minister Koutsoulis, who's not here, his department worked very hard. Those have spread across the country. When Minister Regan was involved with Labour and Advanced Education, the apprenticeship harmonization started with Nova Scotia and Alberta and is now spread across the country in labour mobility. The federal government has just recently announced Minister LeBlanc as responsible for internal trade. My message to him very clearly: let's collaborate together in Atlantic Canada, reducing the conflicts not only between provincial barriers, but the federal barriers, from environmental assessments to food inspections. Let's set the template in Atlantic Canada, and we can spread it across the country. I am confident that we can take the rest of the country with us.
That's great. Your thoughts on the growth opportunities with the green economy?
Well, we've seen a tremendous opportunity. We're seeing, I think when you look at Atlantic Canada, for example, I talk about energy an awful lot. I believe we need to connect our provinces around hydroelectricity. There's a tremendous growth we're going to see in wind potential. We're capped in this province right now with the restrictions that we see. Very proud of Efficiency Nova Scotia that has worked very hard with citizens, the province, to reduce our own individual footprint, whether it is in insulation programs, whether it is how we energize our own homes, looking at new innovative ways for each of us to reduce our carbon footprint. So I believe there's an opportunity individually for us. I think when it comes to the green economy, I think Atlantic Canada needs to tackle the green economy as a collective. It's an opportunity to open ourselves up, and I believe through this economy we can tear down some of those barriers we talked about earlier.
That's great. Will the province consider a province-wide hotel levy room tax? It's a new one.
It's not been on our radar, to be honest with you. We've had jurisdictions who've asked for that. It is in some places, but it's not at this point something that we've entertained.
Okay. You mentioned we could be Canada's port of entry. What initiatives are we taking to attract business to both Nova Scotia and to the seaports in particular?
Well, I mentioned earlier the work we're doing with the airport. I can tell you, I look at the growth of Halifax and Stanfield International Airport over the last even the last decade, the changes that have taken place, the fact that we're seeing major carriers see this as the East Coast entry point, the work that working with our partners to ensure that we get more direct flights in and out of Halifax. I think it's not only for us to travel and vacation, it's actually about commerce. It's about attracting more people in. I often sell this airport as Atlantic Canada's international airport when I'm in China. It should be the entry point into this region. We look at our ports, both here in Halifax is doing a tremendous job. We know their future plan is about expansion and growth. That will require some connection with CN, who's an important partner for us. But the good news is all of our transportation partners and infrastructure are collaborating, I think, at a level they have not been for quite some time, looking for how do we ensure that not only do we continue to make ourselves an East Coast port in Canada, but how do we make the East Coast, make us relevant in the East Coast of North America, and we'll continue to work with them.
Have you considered prompt payment legislation?
Yes.
Will you legislate it?
We'll have we're looking forward to the spring session. We've had a very fulsome, Duncan Williams and his team came in and did a very fulsome discussion and presentation to our caucus. I think all of the members were enthusiastic. I had a chance yesterday to look at legislation that'll be coming in to the spring session, and I look forward to it happening.
When will the new Burnside extension be completed so I can get home more quickly?
You're talking about the connector?
I am.
Yeah, so I refer to that as the Sackville-Bedford-Burnside connector. We're actually connecting the community of Sackville through Bedford and Burnside. I think it's an important piece of infrastructure. The minister most recently spoke that we'll require the federal government to help participate in that. We have worked with them on a very large capital expenditure on road infrastructure, all of our major arteries. As you know, the 104 is now, we've hit the final stage of the P3 bidding where our partner will be chosen. And this project will be an exciting opportunity. The great part about the Burnside connector, Sackville-Bedford-Burnside connector is it's a greenfield. So that project will be able to move along much quicker than some of our other infrastructure that we're doing in terms of as we're trying to keep commuting traffic going at the same time adding to these highways.
That's great. Well, thank you, Premier. We've very quickly gone through most of the questions. I know we didn't get to ask all of the questions, so I apologize for that, but we do have limited time. Are there any, oh, sorry, I had one more question. It was here it is right here. And maybe it's the question you'd like to wrap up on, but what are you most excited about for Nova Scotia? This was the National Public Relations Instagram question. What are you most excited about for Nova Scotia, and what is our biggest challenge?
I'm most enthusiastic about the energy that I feel in communities across this province who have stepped up, accepted the challenge of creating their own destiny. I believe the Ivany Commission has been an important part of that. Engage Nova Scotia has been working extremely hard with communities all across this province. I'm excited about the fact when I travel, I am now getting the questions of lots of exciting things happening in Halifax and Nova Scotia. Tell us about it. That's a far different cry than 5 years ago when I was traveling on your behalf. Some of the challenges to continue to make sure that we continue to stay positive, embrace Fatu and newcomers into our province. We need to grow our population. I've said this many times, we can do everything right, which governments never do. But we can do everything right collectively. If we don't grow our population, we're in a tough spot. We need to welcome more newcomers. We need to provide an opportunity for our own sons and daughters to see themselves and their future. And I always say this, as a parent, I was never worried about my children leaving. As a matter of fact, I would encourage it. But I wanted them to have a path back. And for the last 3 years, we've retained more young people than we've lost. We've repatriated Nova Scotians to come home after they've gone out into the community, after they've gone out into the world to get lived experiences, and bringing them back. Changed young men and women to change our community. We're on the right track. We're on the right path. We're going to continue to manage this province by working in partnership with all of you. Continue to grow our population, control government spending, provide economic opportunities, more job growth. All of that can happen. And finally, my final goal is I want to make sure that every single Nova Scotian sees themselves in this province. I'm proud of the diversity we've put on the bench. I'm proud of the diversity that we're seeing in our public service, and I'm equally proud of the work that we've been able to do with the private sector in ensuring that more African Nova Scotians, Mi'kmaq Nova Scotians, are seeing an opportunity for them in our workplace. And that's what happens when we work together in a common goal to want this province to be all it can be.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think we're going to wrap up now. That's been a great conversation. Thank you again for your comments and your honesty and your transparency. In lieu of a
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear what he said? So believe what you read.
Sorry, I thought I'd see the humor in it. In lieu of a gift, we made a donation to Feed Nova Scotia in your name. And Nick Jenery is here today, somewhere, I know. So thank you, Nick. And thank you to our members who asked questions. Thank you all very much. This event really is crucial to us. It's a great opportunity for the Premier to come to talk about the issues that he's thinking about and to reflect on the issues that you're thinking about. I think it's a great learning experience for him as well. Our province has really come a long way, and we will continue to celebrate our successes